Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to FP1. And I want to take today to talk a little bit about Haas. Now, team owner Gene Haas came with some fairly disturbing comments earlier today, so I'll just quote what he said. He said, "I'm just going to wait to see how the season starts off, but if we have another bad year, then it would not be favourable. We did 5 years, that's really the test. If we're going to do this for another 5 years and evaluate it, then we'll have to decide whether to go forward. I'm not saying we won't be back, but it has to be evaluated. To do it for another 5 years, though, that would be a big commitment." Later on in this interview, then, he does go on to talk about just how the business model for the smaller teams doesn't really work in Formula 1, and it's not really financially viable to have a team in the sport in its current guise. And given, of course, the 2021 regulations being a big change to the sport in general, that's going to cost a lot of money, and whether Haas are going to be able to make a positive return on that is, questionable, especially given their performance at the moment. So, summing up Haas's history, and they started the sport obviously in 2016, finishing 8th in the Drivers' Championship with Esteban Gutierrez and Romain Grosjean. Gutierrez was then dropped in favour of Magnussen for 2017, finishing 8th again that year, but 2018 was the year where they really stepped forward, getting 93 points in the championship and finishing 5th, which in their third year in running in Formula 1, that is incredible. However, though, 2019 just wasn't great. Obviously, there was the whole Rich Energy drama, and their car just wasn't really working the tyres in race situations. It was great over a lap, but over the race, they just fell away, and they didn't even earn a third of the points that they made the year before. 9th in the championship, their worst year in the sport in total. So it does make sense why Gene Haas might not want to carry on putting his money into the sport. And for those that haven't seen Drive to Survive, it was hinted at as well in that when they were talking to Gunther Steiner and Gene Haas as well, and really whether Formula 1 is the right way going forward for this F1 team, and if they can't get into the podium places and getting wins, and is there much point continuing? Can they make a profit off this? Now, the really, really worrying thing here is that he's going to base it off basically the start of the season, and looking at Haas's performance in the preseason test, it wasn't great. Obviously, there was a issue with Grosjean with a puncture, which I can't remember what caused that. It was something to do with the wheel. It was quite a strange failure, but they did not look particularly quick, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw even Williams beating them at the end of the year. Now, I think Williams has the slowest car at the moment, but given how that Haas usually evolves over a season, and usually at the start of the season, it's where they're strongest, especially look back at 2018, where had they not had that failure at the pit stops, they would have got something like a 4th and a 5th place in Australia. That was incredible. Now, can they replicate that this year? Probably not. Looking at their pace, they just don't seem to be anywhere. So if I had to put my predictions in now, I would not be surprised at all if Haas decided to quit at the end of the year and just say, we're not going to go anymore. We're done. And what would that mean? Like, if you think about, let's start from the drivers. Where could they go? Now, I guess it could be a good year for them in that everyone's contracts, bar a few drivers, are expiring. So there are places on the grid. But looking at Magnussen and Grosjean, they've both kind of built up these reputations of being quite difficult to work with. Obviously, Grosjean with his accidents early in his career, and he's not been brilliant in the last couple of years either. And obviously, Magnussen, he's clashed with other drivers on track. Hulkenberg in 2017 being the big example there. Can he find a team that will want him in that working environment, knowing that it might upset relations with other drivers and other team members? It's quite difficult. So where exactly these guys could go, it could be anywhere. I wouldn't say they're in the top 3 teams. There could be a space, say, at Williams, or perhaps at Force India Racing Point. But they're Alfa Romeo maybe as well. There could be a place for someone like Magnussen, but Grosjean, I couldn't really see finding a drive anywhere else. I think just because his relationship with that Haas team was the only reason he really kept his drive this year. And I think he's got to show something absolutely incredible if he does want to be considered for a drive next year, if Haas decide to stay, that is. So Grosjean, for me, I think is out. Magnussen possibly has a few chances, but again, it's a big risk from any team to take on a driver who has that kind of history. Of course, that's just the drivers. You've also got to think about all the team members and all the people that could lose their jobs. Obviously, Haas, it's not the biggest Formula 1 team in the world, but that doesn't mean they haven't got a lot of staff. There's a good 200-300 people at least working for that company, both in the US and the UK as well. And that's a lot of people that will be out of their jobs. And given the budget caps as well, there are not going to be many teams wanting to snap up more engineers. So this is quite big for a lot of people's jobs, unless someone decides to buy out Haas, which I will get onto in a minute. So yeah, let's get onto that right now, actually. So could someone buy out Haas? Now, possibly. So go cast your minds back about 6 months, there were a few teams considering entering the sport for 2021. The issue is with entering a brand new team is obviously that costs A lot of money, and B, you're not likely to be competitive. Look back in 2010 when we had those 3 new teams join the grid, HRT, Virgin Racing and Lotus, and they were basically in their own little category at the back. And yeah, if there was only one team, that'd be absolutely rubbish. It was kind of nice that there was 3 teams so they could at least fight, but yeah, it wasn't great. And funnily enough, within 3 years, all those 3 teams had dropped off the grid entirely. So instead of starting up a new team, would it perhaps be better to buy out an existing one that want to get out anyway? So perhaps this is a lifeline for all those people working at Haas. If someone decides to take on that team and, well, I guess accept a car that is going to be not competitive, but it's also not going to be a backmarker, perhaps that's the better and more logical way to go. So those were just my thoughts then. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think is going to happen to Haas. Will they have a good season? Will they have a bad season? Will they stay in the sport beyond 2021? And what happens to the drivers if that doesn't happen? And yeah, of course, don't forget to like, comment, and of course subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next one.